Thank you, and thank you, Minister. Welcome back, and thank you for taking the time today. I want to address you on the disabled person's parking card and the primary medical certificate and the regulations governing the eligibility for these that come under the remit of your department. I addressed the House on this subject on Make Way Day, and my issue arose from the experiences of one constituent who's well known to me and the hardship experienced by that one person. However, much to my surprise and maybe a little bit of horror, I've had a lot of people contact me since then who are experiencing the same and in a similar position. I'm asking for a review of the criteria for eligibility on the basis that if you hold a primary medical certificate, you're entitled to the card, but you still must automatically apply for it. But more importantly, from that flows the exemption from the payment of VAT, motor tax, vehicle registration, and all of the reliefs that come to assist in the purchase or the adaptation of a car for people who are drivers with disabilities or who have a passenger with a disability. The criteria as it stands for this status is on the medical grounds of disabled persons and who are severely or permanently disabled, and that shall be assessed by reference to a particular set of criteria. That include the loss of both legs, restricted lower limbs, a loss of both hands or both arms. What it doesn't take account of is the people who have the loss of one upper limb or who have a severe, debilitating and life-changing disability and are falling short of this criteria. The constituent that I refer to in particular had an appalling accident when she was in her 20s. She's now a number of decades on from that. She didn't receive any compensation at the time in the circumstances arising from the accident, but she has lost one arm. That affects her washing, dressing, typing, managing her phone, managing toileting, driving. She has to pay for all the adaptations of a car herself. She gets absolutely no relief from the state in this regard because she doesn't fit any of these criteria. Yet every minute of every day she is reminded of her disability in an ambidextrous world. The qualifying criteria, as they're currently prescribed in legislation, are far too stringent. They require a level of disability that appears to be deliberately designed to ensure exclusion. But where is the compassion for those who have lost one arm? In this particular constituent's incident, it is as a result of accident, but the subsequent representations I've had to me are arising from cancer and the treatment of cancer. So there is a wide group of people that are included in this. Since entering in this question, I've done a bit of research, and apparently it has come up a lot in our time, both in the Seanad and as parliamentary questions over the last decade, especially. And I note that a review was last undertaken in 2011, and I note that the responses are always that to widen the criteria would open the floodgates of payment. And you smile, and I'm anticipating that response. So what I'm particularly asking for is, can we consider a graduated relief that if we were to look at for possibly that if we could have differing degrees of disability, and that would entitle you to differing stages of relief, and this would demonstrate compassion without opening prohibitive floodgates, and that would leave because the situation as it stands at the moment is far too stark, and it's devoid of empathy, and it's not supportive or cognizant of the very real and genuine impairments that are experienced. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Seery-Kearney. And can I ask you, Minister Butler, to respond to your and before I start, can I just congratulate you on your appointment as last Cathaoirleach of the Seanad? A huge honour for you and your family, and well deserved. So Oireachtas. Thank you very much, Minister. Appreciate that. Senator, thank you very much for your question, and you made the points very, very well in relation to this issue, which has been raised on many, many occasions, as you've quite rightly said, in both houses. I am taking this on behalf of my colleague Minister Hildegarde Naughton, who is unavailable this morning. The disabled parking scheme operates by segregating a proportion of public parking bays for the use of disabled parking permit holders. These permits, also known as European parking cards or disabled parking badges, are available to people living in Ireland whose mobility is severely and permanently restricted, whether they are drivers or passengers. The intention of the permit and of the disabled parking scheme more generally is to provide access to parking bays of sufficient size in close proximity to important services as post offices, banks, pharmacies and shops, for people for whom access to such services would be denied if they could not park and disembark either because of the size of a parking bay or because they could not park within a short distance of a service because of their limited mobility. An automatic entitlement to a disabled parking permit is extended to holders of the primary medical certificate, including those who are affected by dwarfism or restricted growth, as I like to call it, those without the use of one or both legs, and those without both hands or both arms. And this is the issue that you have raised, in fairness, in relation to your constituent who has lost one limb. But the criteria there is quite clear. I suppose it's very stark. Those without the use of one or both legs and those without both hands or both arms. The entitlement is granted on the grounds that each of the disabilities encompassed by the primary medical certificate clearly involves a severe impairment of the ability to walk as a result of compromised or absent lower limbs in some cases, and as a result of severely disrupted balance in the case of those missing both arms. The permit is also available to applicants who are registered as blind with the National Council for the Blind in Ireland, so as to minimise their interaction with motor traffic and maximise their safety in navigating from a parking space to the entrance of their destination. In 2010, as you said, the Department of Transport conducted a review of the disabled parking scheme in consultation with various stakeholders. One of the central issues examined in the course of the review was eligibility for the scheme. Disability groups in particular were unhappy at the fact that some people were being issued with disabled parking permits because they had particular medical conditions rather than an actual mobility impairment. As a result of the review, the scheme was revised so that permits are now given on the basis of mobility impairment rather than the diagnosis of a particular condition or illness. This is in line with the original intention of the scheme and prioritises accessible parking for those who need it the most. The possibility of extending the eligibility criteria for the scheme to include people with non-mobility related physical disabilities or those with certain forms of intellectual or cognitive impairment has been raised with the Department of Transport on a number of occasions. Officials from the Department of Transport have consulted extensively with the joint issuing authorities of the scheme, the Disabled Drivers Association of Ireland and the Irish Wheelchair Association on the matter. In light of this consultation, there are no plans at present either to change the current criteria or to carry out a fresh review to that end. I take on board what you have said in relation to graduated relief for different degrees of disability and different stages of relief, and I will bring that point back to the Minister, and also the point you made about the one limb. I think you made a point very, very well, and it's something I have come across myself in my own constituency.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I appreciate and I hear that you recognise the challenge. I think what we're really focusing here or maybe honing in on is the primary medical certificate and the qualifying criteria for that. Unfortunately, I accept the need to confine the parking permit to people with genuine mobility issues, and I get that link, and that's very well made. However, it's the parking permit is inextricably linked to the adaptation of cars for driving purposes, and that grant aid, and consequently, if you have one limb or you're missing one upper limb, then you still have to make the adaptation. You may be able to walk to the distance, to shopping, to work, to whatever, but you still have to incur the expenditure. And it's more the expenditure element of this that we need to address rather than that the criteria. So in a way, we need to decouple them from each other and maybe have that red circled. Originally, I had considered that maybe that this is a matter for Minister Rabbitte, and I will pursue it with her also, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Seery-Kearney. Thank you. Minister, do you want to supplement?
To conclude briefly, I can assure the Senator that the Department of Transport is very aware of the complex challenges facing the various groups that you mentioned here today, be they people with physical disabilities that do not directly affect mobility, or people with autism or intellectual disabilities and their parents and their carers. I do take on board your point. You made it very well, you know, that the primary medical certificate that sets out the criteria, and the criteria is quite stringent and in relation, as we said. So the person who is applying must have lost 2 upper limbs as against 1. So, as I said, I will take on board your comments and I will pass them back on to the Minister. Gorv Mahagat.